So you're not providing over like supervisor's training.
Welcome.
field or-
Origami.
Yeah.
But you're on your list. What we were talking about that was. Okay, okay. I think. Yeah.
No, it was not his on-site day.
We got everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you wanted to give your time now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So welcome to our design thinking class. If you guys don't know me, I think I pretty much know everybody. My name is Chris Vasquez. As usual, we want to go over the board. Who's here for the first time in this building? You guys? Okay, so some of you guys. So I'll go ahead and I'll just assign myself as the leader, the emergency leader. Brian H. Brian, can you raise your hand? He'll be the sweeper. In the event that we do have to vacate the room, Diane is our first aid provider. And if you notice on the way in down the hallway, that's where you have the first aid kit, the AED, the fire extinguisher. And then Nez is our evacuation coordinator. So Nez, where is the refuge?
It's going to be via the ASU, but there's also another stair on the right after the snip. So.
So let's follow Nez.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay, well, enjoy. Everybody signed in, right?
Yeah, just, I know, a small question, just fill in the table so we have 4 each, just one over here. This is just to make the first exercise a little easier, one of your teams, you want to. I hope that's not so easy. Or you want to pick me out. It's fine. So welcome everyone, I'm Chris Becker, I am your facilitator. I need to give you a little information here. We are going to be enjoying some time together today and next week. Today we're going to be discussing a number of things. We'll be using some paper and pencil. There is some digital stuff if we want to transfer it in, but most of it can be done on the materials in front of you. And then there'll be some stuff that you can take out into the world, refine, use some tools to sort of add polish to it, etc., for bringing in next week. Does that make sense? This is a conversation. We're gonna have some fun. Raise your hand. Don't feel if you have a question. There's no questions, so I'm here to answer those. I will wander around. The goal is to sort of work within your team members, and we're going to be putting stuff on the walls and using some paper as we go. That will be helpful. Well, I'm going to go over a little bit as we go, and then we'll sort of extend as we continue to do that. Does that make sense? I'm curious, how many of you that sort of know each other or work in similar teams? Okay, so there is some familiarity. I'm just going to do a quick thing at the beginning, just get us all started. But like anything, we're all in new space. We want to get to know each other. There's no way I'm going to remember any of your names, so don't let that hurt your feelings. I'm just going to you. Just let that know that's the case. But ultimately, we're here to do some learning. We're here to do some practice, and that's what I'm here to help with. So as we go. So my background, I am I teach in the world of design. I teach at the Arts Center College of Design, Otis College of Design, and I have written a couple books. I facilitated in this space for the better part of 15 years, and I like doing it. So hopefully we'll have some fun. As I said, teach lots of college students and outputs. And my background is in graphic design, but also in media design, and I am a practicing user experience designer as for my job when I find work and other things, but mostly I'm doing more education stuff as we go today. As I said, teach at a number of places. I've done a number of exercises, and some of that stuff will be infused into what we're doing today. But also, if you have questions or you want to look into more, I'm around for as we go. As I said, more about me, but you don't really care. You're here to learn. right? Now, whatever, yeah, I did some stuff. I'm here to sort of say that I know what I'm doing at some level. But the role of this is we have a design thinking workshop that's sort of split up in two parts. Today, we're going to focus mostly about defining and empathizing. We'll work on some exercises to help us get up to speed, understand the process generally, and then we're going to do some practice of the first couple of steps to do that. Can you be an expert design thinker in a one workshop? Hell no. So think of this as just an entry point. It's an opportunity to do some practice. It's a safe space. There's no wrong to do that. But there's an opportunity, obviously, to sort of dip your toes, get a more familiarity with it, and then obviously design is a knowledge by making process. So we're going to do more of that. That make sense?
Perfect, Mr. Beck.
Yes. And then the next part, we'll get into what's more making. We're going to take the next piece. We're going to sort of utilize what we've done today in our workshop, think about it a little more, and then bring it back for making some more stuff, doing some exercises. We'll do some more digital tools next week. So bring your computers in the next outputs, because we'll do use making with some of those tools. But again, a lot of it can still be done in low-term texts in outputs that were here, and we'll extend it as we go. Most of the things start on a piece of paper and then extend themselves digitally, but we don't need to start digitally as it is, which is helpful for workshops generally. So let's start with just a quick. This is going to be a really fast little thing, and it's just a test in how you guys can do it. There's a group of 6 roll ups and join 17. But get a piece of paper and a pencil. Okay, paper. You can do the speed. I have some more. I am going to give. You have speed. Oh, you have paper. That's fine. Anybody need a sheet? Yeah. So I want you to pair up. And the challenge is to draw, yes. And I'll come draw with you in the back, which is fine. Okay, so I'm going to set a quick timer. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to draw your neighbor. You go across, just find it. And I'm going to put the last one. I'll go with you. You do here. Does this make sense? I'm going to set a timer. This is the whole point. 2 minutes. Draw your neighbor. Sorry. I don't want this. You have 10 seconds. 10 seconds left. You got it. Okay. So let's stop this just for a second. Right here. I'm Chris. And your role?
USS like.
Yeah.
And so we're.
I'm the facilitator.
I guess that's.
Yep.
This would be instructor.
And then one little question about why you're taking this. Because I love extending design to as many people as possible. And just get success. We're gonna.
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna leave this for you. Let me ask you a quick question. Everybody, the questions are here. Let me ask you a quick question. Any of you love your drawing?
No.
Why not? All I know you.
There you go.
Did you consider yourself a drawer? No?
Not really.
Okay.
Like.
And you like, what did we mostly draw? Faces.
Yeah.
Why? I said draw your neighbor, right? I could have just drawn your glasses and people maybe would have recognized who you are. The drawing took 2 minutes, right? Is that a good thing or a bad thing for most of you?
It's not.
It's not much. If I said draw your neighbor 1,000 times, 2 minutes, over and over and over again, would you be better at drawing your neighbor?
No.
Not in 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
So the role of this then is practice. It's not about its quality. And are you like it's close? If I show you it, I can say that I think that's my neighbor. Yeah. And if you see yourself in your neighbor, you're like, oh, I see myself. I see myself in that drawing. I'm gonna use Darren's because you treated me. But yeah, I can show this to my kid and you'd be like, I think that's you. I think that's you. Right? It has my face, eyes, nose, chin. So there's a flushing out of the process, right? In a small, oh, that's so good, right? Little drawing. You got more than just a floating head. Is that floating head?
Less is probably more.
Now, the role of this is that it's not about its high quality, but it's about quickly communicating an idea, taking a risk, aligning what that risk could be. It's not about its accuracy necessarily, unless, and some of you were considered drawers or cartoonists, you could do a better job. I went to art school, my drawing still isn't that great, right? But it's also done in 2 minutes. So the role of that 2 minutes is not about the time boxing nature of it is actually the important aspect. The design generally, which we'll talk about today, is this opportunity to not put a long time mark on it, but do it in short sprints, short time box ideas, and then test its value, right? Its feedback loop is how good was it in 2 minutes? You did longer on it, or would you need help? You could change it, you do it again, it's just a face, even just do a stick figure. It's like, oh, my skill is a stick figure. Now, stick figures can be incredibly effective in communicating what they need, right? Under the time constraint of what we're doing. Now, the role of this kind of stuff generally is an opportunity to say, yeah, it's not about its quality, but it's about one, just making a mark on the page, and about doing that. Now, I do this with teams a lot. There's classes at the beginning. This is a lot of use to break down some barriers, reduce each other. And someone might take your drawing home. Make that the back of your phone, the home page or whatever that is. And the role of this generally is that we are here to practice. You're all new at this. Any of you feel like a seasoned design thinker? No, that's why you're here, right? So there's this opportunity to sort of say yeah, I'm gonna be really, really good at this. It's an unreasonable expectation. So therefore, step to it with curiosity. I'm new, I'm gonna get better at this, I'm gonna learn about some of the steps and process, and we're gonna practice it, but it's not pressure filled, it's not about your boss taking a look at it or being presented in front of the whole company for its first quality. It's about learning and practicing it generally. Everybody with me? Yes. Okay, great. So if you're not familiar with designer, it's fine. There's some quotes in here that's sort of useful, but design generally is not finished until someone is using it. And design thinking is a process to get to a place where we can think enough about a problem so that we can make things for people to use. If they are using it, we can get feedback on it. And the role of designing generally is we don't really know until it's actually completed. So we want to fill in the gaps along the process as much as we can. And there's lots of ways to do that with user research. There's lots of ways to do that with process. There's lots of ways to do that with different teams, et cetera, et cetera. And the process that I'll go over today is generally what we as a design community and methodologies that we practice want to use. And we sort of practice them over and over again. And it ultimately helps us solve some big sticky problems at organizations. It helps us make things better for users, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that's sort of relevant, especially in our world today, with how quickly tools change, is that the tools matter a lot less than you actually think when it comes to solving problems. Ultimately, we have to use tools. That's what we do to solve problems to some extent. But the thinking, the teams that get together, the common understanding of the problem, the relationship of how those things are thought about and engaged in, are actually what goes into the tool to polish it, to solve it, to make it a website, to make it a product, to make it a service, whatever that is, right? And the opportunity there is that the tools ultimately are a byproduct of the thinking. Your pencil drawing is a byproduct of the pen. You use what you had available to you. You use a marker or a big color. No, you just use a pen. You know how to use. Now, with practice, these tools can be more efficient. They can make different marks. We could give it more time and say, I want to be rendered in different ways, et cetera, et cetera. But the opportunity ultimately is that it's trying to build a thinking process that gets implemented into the tool usage, et cetera. Now, this is not a software required course necessarily. There will be some software that we may interface with and use, but ultimately we can do a lot of it on a piece of paper. Piece of paper is equally as efficient piece of technology than a website or a product or Figma or any of those other tools that we use in some of these outputs, and then that'll be a way to extend it. Does that make sense? Okay. So who here has actually heard, you always in this class or something, who has like heard of it, read up on it, know a little bit? See some like some head. Yeah, sort of. No? That's what that. So if I say like, oh, do you know what IDEO is? Do you know what IDEO is?
No.
No. Okay. So there's a history. I did not invent any of this stuff. This is not mine to own. Mine to share and to someone evangelize, but there's an opportunity to do that. And design thinking generally has been around for, some would say, as long as designers has been doing their work, but ultimately it actually has been scalable into industry and outputs through essentially consulting, but there's also an opportunity in which designers and education systems have adopted a lot of this process through that. Now, design thinking is a human-centered process and approach that draws on innovation of a designer's set of toolkits. Essentially, it is helping to integrate what people and the possibility of technology and what is required of the business. Now, that's a really high-level way to say, like, we as designers look at the systems and we know what users want, we know what the business wants, and we know what the technology is capable of, and therefore we can do things with those things, right? Now, it's very simplistic, but the role of design thinking comes from this organization called IDEO, which is headed by Tim Brown, who's written a number of books. They were centered in San Francisco for a long time. I think they still are there, but their sort of prominence has been diminished as of late because a lot of their leaders have aged out, have retired, have done that, but their process and their abilities have scaled into larger systems, including that of the D School at Stanford, and basically any design or design education system across the planet. I think the Art Center is at the foundation of what we sort of align to students and outputs. But the core of the process looks like this. It's 5 steps. They seem quite simple at sort of articulating them, but we'll talk about why that gets a little more complicated. But ultimately, it is empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Has anybody ever heard these terms before? Yeah. Maybe you're like, oh yeah, I've seen it modeled as the design thinking process, and this is what I design. make it look this way. You Google design thinking, you'll see like 6 other frameworks that follow the same sort of steps, but ultimately make it look a little bit different. But ultimately, it also can get wrapped up in this idea of the double diamond. Sometimes we see this out of the London design. What's the organization? It doesn't matter. They have a overarching body of design, and they call it the double diamond, and that's the discover, define, develop, and deliver. Now, ultimately, the design process moves from the left to the right, and we spend time in each of these outputs. And then the diamond sort of represents this idea of divergent thinking, things that go out, and convergent thinking, process that goes in. Now, we will spend this first part of this workshop in these 2 papers, discover and define, as discuss methodologies, processes for how do we use divergent thinking, do we think about our process to stage it, and then how does that turn the corner and help us define what our problems are, who our users are, et cetera, et cetera. Is this clear? Now, the role of this as a top level process is that it seems quite simple, but ultimately design thinking is rooted in this relationship of empathy. And David Kelly is also a founder of IEO and helped set up the design school, the D school at Stanford University, where they sort of teach interdisciplinary skills to lots of students. But the role there is that we bring these tools of thinking about people. And be able to think about people aligns us to our opportunity to extend that to the general world. And design thinking sort of starts in these sort of rings, and there's lots of deliverables and lots of parts of the process. And we'll practice a couple of these as we get through the day. But ultimately, if you have a problem statement, or you define the problem effectively, you can understand who your users are. You can then specify their needs specifically to task or the problem or the space or the product or the service or whatever that is. And that can lead to research that helps you understand an insight. That insight helps you explore possibilities in ideating. It helps you prototype solutions associated with that end user. It helps you build out and converge down into refinable ideas that are testable in a market and scalable or distributable out to the same users that you were testing with. The goal of design thinking generally is not to do it at scale, but to do it in small groups under tight timelines, typically to make sure that what you're producing doesn't take a lot of time or cost a lot of money, but also give returns, feedback, and data. Right? Now, the role of research generally at the beginning is that we don't know. We're open to sort of the possibilities are, and the research at the beginning helps us sort of focus on the right problem, not get distracted by lots of different priorities, but get to a centered idea and what the user's focus should be. So, and we'll talk about this generally as we go. Now, I'll walk through each of these phases, and I'll cover this a little bit next week, but there's an opportunity of like where the process typically starts is with empathy. We'll talk a little bit more about empathy generally, but the role of the empathizing process is that it starts with talking about your users. Who are the people your product or service is servicing? What do they generally need? What do they know about the company or the system, the processes there? And what is it that they sort of understand in the relationship of competition or value exchange, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of things that can sort of go into understanding what your users' relationship is. So whether that's their family life or their socioeconomic, or their location in space, or wherever that is, right? There's lots of sort of opportunities there to engage in that. And the empathy phase is really designers' opportunity to sort of say, we really want to care about our end user, and we want to align what the needs of those people are over to maybe what the business is sort of really focused on, and we can sort of overlap that in a meaningful way to say, what are practices that we can do to help engage in more empathetic thinking and a more human, what is known as human-centered, focused sort of ideation. The next phase is really, as you can see, it sort of turns the corner. I've understood my user is, I relate that. This is where we then can define who our end user is. We can analyze observations, we can synthesize research and develop problems or core problem statements, and we can identify what problems to focus on and why. Now, in a workshop such as this, we can sort of take some general shots to crack the space. It's not about being as 100% accurate because we don't have a ton of research. Maybe you've sort of done some user research, bring some institutional knowledge into the space, what you're dealing with or what you're grappling with, which is totally fine. But the opportunity here is not to sort of put too much pressure on it, just like our draw. Now, the define phase is sort of fascinating because it typically overlaps pretty generally with the business, what are the business's priorities? What are they trying to do? How is it aligned with what the user is doing? Are there things the business should be considering that they're not? Are there opportunity spaces or gaps? This is where design thinking in that sort of early stage to say, well, look, we just haven't serviced X. These people are really being like they're just being ignored, or there just isn't an opportunity to sort of service them underneath what the business priorities are. So you can expand business priorities or you can enhance that. But the define phase really is about focus, prioritizing. We'll do some things with this, including like voting, using some processes to sort of get people all on the same page, but there's a lot of that goes into it. The third phase is where we skipped out of the sort of the first diamond, and then we move into ideation. Ideation is at its core is about brainstorming, sketching ideas, drawing a lot. There's a lot of sort of messy making in the sort of ideation phase to some extent. And the role there is that we are trying to navigate the opportunities. What are the possibilities? We need to make a lot. There's no right or wrong, and there's ideation is this can sometimes be like that's the catalyst and fun part. Lots of designers love spending as much time as they can in the ideation phase. Do not rush the ideation phase if you're in the process. Let it air as the opportunity to do that. And it takes some practice, but there's lots of little things to do, and we'll practice a couple things in that. Ideation ultimately leads to prototyping. Prototyping is at its core, it's sort of built on this idea of making tangible things that people can use to low tech or sometimes even high tech methodologies. There's the prototyping phase at our current state of being with artificial intelligence is at like this like fledgling birth of possibility. It's not even fledgling. We've been doing it a long time, and now we have AI tools that can do it faster. They teach at the Santa Monica College, where we're teaching physical hardware stuff, and this girl in 20 minutes made a game of Pong using Claude Code. Like I was like, you would never have been able to do that at any other time unless you could ask an AI to do it for you. Now, asking the right question, helping you build what the thing is that you're making is actually in that possibility space, which is where prototyping is showing the possibility in the first place, which is quite fun. And then the last piece of that is we built a prototype, we understood our problem, we can then go test it back with the people that we were initially solving the problem for to validate if these things that we made were useful or viable in the first place at all. Right? Now, the role of this stuff generally is that the cycle can be both long and short, but it's no real simple idea. And the reality of the design thinking process is that it's made to look quite linear, right? Oh, look at how simple. And then the empathy phase, and then the problem phase. But ultimately, it's actually quite complicated. It folds back on itself a lot. You don't know if you're going to, like, I tested it, we had a totally wrong user, and now we have to go back to this idea. So there's this relationship of trusting the process enough, which we'll practice in here to sort of get a sense of what that looks like. And then as you get it into the world, really willing to say, like, when do you go back? When do you fold onto itself as well? And this is where even David Kelly says this, like, it's not a linear path. It's a big mess of looping back into different places in the process. But ultimately, the process will lead to better outcomes. We can reduce costs for the business. We can understand the relationship of validating ideas quicker. And we can then put more ideas through the company funnel, right? It's not about choosing winners and losers, but having as many as you can, because the process can actually result in speed at execution. Only if people who know how to do it are engaged in that speed. Is that clear? Any questions? Okay. I'll share these decks at the end as well, so if you have questions. Yes.
Are you going to touch more on empathy? You know, how to develop empathy for the people?
Yes. So this session will be focused on empathy and on some of the define phase. So yes, we'll spend a significant time building out our empathy skills. Okay, so let's keep going. Now, the role of design thinking at its core is a set of processes and outputs that really tries to impact the way a business sort of thinks and aligns their human beings. Some of it's organizational, some of it's training, some of it's even where you impact the business generally. But design thinking focuses on the people. What is desirable by our end users, and how can the business, how viable is that for the business to invest in or to engage in, and is there technology that overlaps with making that effective, making that viable for the end user to build. Now, the role in the middle is this idea of like it's innovative or it's useful or it's sort of engaged in. And the experience that we sort of focus on is we think about a lot of these things, understand who our end users are, and then we can say, well, look why this one was justifiable versus that one. Spend time in rooms like this, saying, here's why these ideas are worth moving forward, because we know it's viable, we know the business needs it, we know the users are really focused on it, because we have data from our research or outputs and the way designers think to focus on those things. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, the role of design thinking is really at the foundation. It's sort of the undercurrent of a lot of things that we do. Now, I work in the realm of user experience design. So we talk about these things of like all the stuff that lives underneath the water of an iceberg. Like the interface of a website is just the stuff that you see. But what actually went into it is all this could potentially be lots of stuff that is unseen. And lots of businesses function that way. You have no idea what happens behind the scenes to sort of make a successful interaction or a customer that's really happy. Like there's hard things to sort of understand what those are. But we as designers focus on that so that we can say, here is what is the steps of the process that lead to the surfacing of better solutions or better outcomes. Now, the visual design is just what people see ultimately, but it can be the difference between focusing on that thing or saying like that's really not important to our end use, so we just don't want to work on it, right? Now, the opportunity of design thinking is to work on this the undercurrent so that when you actually are forced to say, well, what should be surfaced, what should move into the world, has that opportunity. And this is where we see this a lot, is that design thinking focuses on the problems. We focus on a problem early, we understand who our user is, and we focus on the desirability, who our audience is, what do they need, what is the most important aspect of that. And that then can help us say, we can focus on a goal that overlaps between what our end users need, what our business is interested in sort of achieving, and what they can actually do. Lots of places they go, we'd love to send humans to the moon. You're like, does your company make a rocket? No. Well, you can't really achieve that goal. You have to use somebody else, right? Or you have to figure out another way. There's things that are sort of within the realm of possibility, and there's stuff that's out. And sort of focusing on that idea is a good opportunity. And being able to sort of articulate that generally in why you're thinking about stuff, what you're making, helps a business, helps you as a designer, helps the story you tell, et cetera, et cetera. Any questions here? Okay, so like I was saying, we're going to start at the beginning of the focus. What is the problem we want to do? Well, to do that, we have to sort of articulate some. Now, there may be lots. This is not about being accurate, but we're just going to practice framing some design challenges. And this is an opportunity to sort of, each of you write them down. So get out, I have other paper here, but we're going to get out sheet paper. You have paper on your own, that's fine. If you need paper, let me know. And we're going, you can write on big sheets as well, but don't feel like you need to use these. This, or you can even write on the back of your drawing if you needed. Yes. Got it. Have you ever written a design challenge before? No. Okay. Here's your opportunity. So this is a premise called the design challenge framing. The role here is that we're going to focus on a challenge. You're going to write one out. A challenge that exists in your organization, your team, your outputs. And you're just going to write it just plain language at first. What is the problem you or your team is trying to solve? And then we will go through a simple process of sort of reframing that as a question. And then talking about the limits of the impact of what that challenge could do. And then we will write down some constraints. We need the whole team to get together. We need investment from our boss. We need our customers to be more on board. Whatever. That makes sense. But start at the beginning. We're just writing down a problem.
Chris, is this in a group or individual?
Individually. We will each then share our problems and we'll vote on them later. There will be a group in the
Yeah, I'm trying to do something else. Yeah, go ahead.
and there's sometimes it's it doesn't matter which one it is, just pluck one.
Yes.
It could be organizational. It could be mental. Oh, I can go fix it. Challenge. There we go. Fixed.
That's the issue. That's the issue.
Right one out quickly.
So there's three.
Wait, what you?
More.
Then
I love that. One, yeah, just write one problem down for now. If you have more, we'll start, but let's run through the process of one question right away. What is the problem your team is trying to solve? That's the big one. That feels like the least one. That's any organization. It's okay. The challenge is not, it does not have to be mutually exclusive. It can be in multiple places we're dealing with the exact same challenges.
Going around.
If you want your own, you can use that.
Okay, everybody have at least the start of a challenge? Written down? The next step is just rewrite that challenge as a question. Yes. That's already a question? Oh, you started, you skipped to number 2 in your first question. How do you? Solution is correct. So the problem is, initially was like backlog is. How might we, right? Unquestioned question. Sometimes actually, well, that's what we're gonna do, right? We're going to do thinking about a problem, we're framing it as a question. And then we're gonna say like, well, what if, now you have a question, you've already written that. Then skip to step 3, like write down what are some of the constraints, the headwinds, the barriers, or the opportunities that will exist in creating that problem. What are the things that we think cause that problem? Okay. Does that make sense? She was already at number 2. Have you written it as a question? She was really good though.
Okay, okay.
Yes, if you write it as a question, the minute you write a question, then you can move to the next step of step 3, which is what are the constraints, headwinds, or things that exist in the challenge? What?
Oh, no, 3 is the impact.
The impact, yes. So these steps, yes. What is that going to achieve? If that question is answered, what does it achieve? Happier workers, more efficient, your customers are happier. What is the goal of that?
That's not.
Collect more. There's more money. Yeah.
Um,
You can collect more money. You can. Considering the barriers at first, so that's.
Ultimate impact on the end user.
Yes.
Okay. Skip. I'm doing this right now.
Well, okay, and they could help the environment. That's helpful. There's sometimes scales that help the end user, that helps the city, that helps the environment. There's others ramping up the impact. The ultimate impact is that it does something meaningful. Good. Yeah, cost savings. Yep.
What does it look become?
Okay, you have impact,
What's the word?
trying to achieve.
Yeah.
I like.
Morale.
Precedent. Historical precedent.
Historical precedents.
That's
Relevant.
It's relevant to today's current marketplace and we have to compete with Google or our policies, yes. Great. If you're sort of running out of impacts, get a couple that are good, it doesn't have to be a million things, that's good. Sometimes it's also like, it changes the world, too big of an impact. How is it gonna be like, sometimes thinking local, like at your user level, at your company level, at your city level, that's do that. They can be daily chain together. The company makes more money, the people are happier, there's more raises, there's more assets like that, all that daily change. Okay. And then the last piece is well, not the last piece, but step 4 is now that you have some things, what are some of the constraints or headwinds or problems or issues in achieving that goal? Hiring's too hard. Turnover's too high. Google keeps stealing their people. You get right? Just write a few. If you think this, what the team is facing or that causes a systematic barrier, it's. Good. Overlap in the organization. Unclear requirements. This is not rocket science, it's like the same thing, repeat over and over at every org, doesn't matter where you are.
Yes, you did.
Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry.
Good. Nice. Okay. So then the last piece, the last step, if you have some good headwinds, you have some decent things like you're gonna retrain your customers. Then the question is, if you rewrote the problem, if you wrote at the very beginning, is there anything that you would change or modify based on some of the steps of the process that your goal was there? The rewriting of the challenge, it's important to re-input what is the goal and what is the challenge. Does that make sense? So you rewrite the problem statement by reapplying, what is the problem, making Bill in multiple languages. Okay, great. So if that is tweaked or redone, how would you rewrite the problem statement that institutes the major goal of that? And what it would achieve. Does that make sense? So what is the opportunity to just take a step? Let's take this. Here, like this. Impact. Yes. How would you take this increase and accessibility for customers into this? Right? Because right now it's really about multi-language, but that multi-language is about right? Does that make sense? So you're combining that language to make sure that you're not missing that. You're folding back in some of the things, some of the constraints and problems and impacts that you're trying to do back tweak into your initial state. Okay. So the improve in communication improves public trust. How does it well, we choose redundancy. So your original problem, there's lots of cards. Yeah, so how much for the department? It's because it's public trust is number 4 as well. So two.
And I didn't put the more.
Difficult way. Taking your same words, I'm just re-articulating it back into your problem. Does that make sense? You're taking the same thing, but you've identified a few opportunities, some things that got in the way of that, and the language of things like public trust, very important for putting you back into or challenge.
So, one of these one of the concepts
Back into the question. So you're retweaking the number 1. Is that clear? Okay. Once you have your challenge reframed, put a box around it. I'll give you a couple seconds to put a box around your reframed challenge. You've rewritten it. Some of the things are important, just folding in some of the language, some of the opportunity is, faces. Ultimately, a lot of the language you try to writing challenge, like, is it fine? Is not. Great. Yeah. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do. Now that you have framed the challenge, some of you are like, I don't know, it feels okay. We're gonna share our challenges. You have these red dots on your table. I want each of you to go around and read your challenge, one at a time to each other. And then when you get done all sharing your challenge, you're all gonna vote. You get 3 votes. You're allowed to vote for your own challenge once, and 2 for others. And where you're going to then define a challenge between our tables, which bubbles up at the top. Does this make sense? Share your challenge. All right.
You guys those notes look clean.
Sharing's here.
I'm on my phone to do it. If you wait, make sense of it. Yeah. Yeah, design. Me and also check out the files. Yeah.
Despite poor hiring plan.
So you're just rewriting, right?
Oh, this.
Everything back into a statement.
Everything into a sentence, yeah. Actually, you know what's really good for this kind of stuff?
That's fine. It's not helping the environment though, which is our goal.
That's true.
You know?
But for adding clarity to your language, help me make this not so wordy. It's like, here you go. Is this better? Like, hell yeah, it is. All right. As I said, share your challenge, and then we'll do a quick vote.
Oh, just among our.
Just among your teammates.
Oh, I know. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you can, yes.
Well, no, that's right now.
So what is the alternate?
Worked in public trust, and it's now improved.
It's just hard. It's just not easy stuff, honestly. It's like, oh man, how do I jam that in there? You want to say, you make different, you have to make compose.
And reimburse the power. You better have this problem solved, yeah. You ask all. My life,
Just you just voted? Oh, okay.
I did. Sure.
That do not facilitate development of the
Like the idea.
And my suggestion, sometimes when you work with that, essentially sure all employees are not confused that like these laws. So like old people, customer service.
So those are the office.
And if he says.
Sure, and excited. Yeah, I think it's so odd because I don't know what the core issue is. When we want them to use.
Yeah.
Not the pothole.
But a lot of my sister agrees with the ask for it, say, other utilities have.
Give us another 3 minutes. Get your votes in, 3 minutes.
Systems that do.
Help us anywhere. In my.
But it's all help the customer, help us. So.
But on their hand, it's an issue. Also, we get three drafts.
Oh, nice to meet you. I think I have to go see.
I feel good about this. I think I didn't have it, so maybe. Okay, one more go. Break the tie. Usually 5, 5. Break the tie. Everybody put in.
Yeah. One more.
Three votes.
3 votes each.
Which is okay.
And you can vote one time. You can.
The premise there.
Fine. Generally. You're living my law, then.
Oh, it's up to me. Hey, you know, I couldn't stand it. Can't say nothing.
Okay. So it's.
That's the vacation.
You need to ensure all employees. To ensure the desired outcome policy is achieved. Such as collections or operational improvement. Customer experience. We don't know. if the
Okay.
policy is effective.
Has everyone voted? Do we feel like we have consensus, a little bit of a consensus?
Yeah.
Voting is somewhat incomplete, as we know that even about our own country. But it's better than nothing, right? So at least it leads to some opportunities, so lots of things bubble at the top. So I'm just gonna go around this table, you all have very interesting problems. I don't want to sort of say that just because you can get voted for, it's not meaningful. But we got, for the, brevity of time, we're just gonna share one of the table. But we'll start with you, want to hold up?
So I did one again.
Okay, great.
You just wanna know the problem or?
Just reread the statement.
Why are LADWP customers not enrolling?
Great. Paperless billing, okay, good question.
I should put all the comments in.
Great. That's it, yeah, okay. Over here.
How to offer 980 scheduling to staff without severely impacting an operation?
Good, that is targeting, but you all were.
I worked at JBL for a while, it was like, I don't know, you said to me, so I was like, all of you were sounding insane, could do what else was true. Do this acronyms you were throwing around, I was like, I'm like, well, you'll learn it, just, I'm like, it would be forever, right? So 8, So, good. And you had 6 votes, it doesn't matter how many votes, but they sort of line that up. Over here, we have a top on the bubble up.
Why are customers not participating in energy efficient programs?
Okay. Energy efficient programs, good. Over here.
Yeah.
How can we sort out, experienced trainers with effective knowledge transfer faster?
Good. Knowledge transfer faster. You can see a lot of things that sometimes design challenges sort of align to very specific aspects of what any business or any organization is doing. And the role of, are there lots of challenges to go after? Absolutely. Every team, every opportunity has that. But there is a power in sort of saying, by writing it down, by getting some teams to vote on it, at least creates some level of focus. And you can say, oh, well, which ones have priority or doesn't? We all have particular priorities that we work on in our individual days. And that can be, sometimes feel like, how do I get it bubbled up? I'm just over here slogging on it. But there's opportunity actually from a design perspective of articulating it effectively as a challenge, which those other people go, yeah, I have noticed that. And yes, that does feel like it's entrenched or it's hard or it's there as a consistent problem. Just the ability to sort of write it down and then prioritize it through some voting is one way to get teams sort of aligned, and we'll then sort of think about these things generally. All your problems are still relevant, but we need to sort of create some level of focus, and each of your teams now have a sort of like aligned. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So one of the things that is important. Any of you are familiar with John Dewey? Or know of John Dewey? John Dewey is famous education reformer, psychologist, and this is one of my favorite quotes to use with development students. We actually don't learn by experience; we learn by reflecting experience. So only by saying like, oh, I wrote this thing. This is even that idea. I wrote a problem down, and then I did some steps, and then I returned back to the problem to see if it actually held weight or needed to be modified. It's a reflective process. Design thinking ultimately is a process of education, and we're trying to imply a way to build a reflection back to the organizations and the users of which you're engaged in. And the opportunity there is to say, well, we wrote it down. We let people read it. And someone goes, no, that's not good enough. And those are like, oh, man, it was really long-winded. I'm like, yeah, okay. It started long. Well, does it need to be reduced? Does it need to be more succinct? Writing at some level is kind of challenging, but there's also other things. There's like tools like ChatGPT that you can like, this is really long. Hey, clarify this for me, or can you just pull out the salient points? Some of that I think is actually sort of undermining some of the like longer thinking that we're doing in the organizations, but that's a whole other sort of problem that we have. But ultimately, feeding back to your team, hey, is this a consistent problem? Does everyone agree? Are we sort of voting on it? It's an opportunity to extend that. Does that make sense? So part of this is sort of aligned to the early stages of what do we know we're working on? What are we thinking about? There's lots of things in the day that we can think about, but if we get a team to say, we're here to focus on X, we define the problem, we voted on it, we're now going to sort of use some brain space to not think about all those other things, but to just say, let's talk about what billing or whatever, paperless billing or whatever that is, right? That's sort of opportunity. Now, this aligns to this idea of human-centered design, which, if you look at the lineage of design thinking, it sort of started as human-centered design, and then design thinking got added into that. And then it got extended to this relationship of how do we develop systems that aim at making it usable and useful for the needs and the requirements applying human factors, ergonomics, usability, and knowledge needs. Now, if we work in design systems or in outputs, human-centered design is really saying we focus on the people, and because that's who we're solving problems for ultimately. And there's lots of nuance associated with that, which design thinking can help us be more effective at thinking about. Are you familiar with Dieter Rams? No, Dieter Rams? No, Dieter Rams, famous product designer, mostly famous for making products at Braun. He made sort of minimalist product design, shavers and small appliances, beautiful record players, just like you can find them, there were lots of them. Had huge impacts on Johnny Ive at Apple. Like we don't have products like this in our pocket without this. But he's ultimately sort of fascinating, saying like you can't understand good design if you don't understand people. Design is made for people, right? Like it seems very simple. There's lots of organizations that go, our customers way over there. It's hard to talk to them. So we're just gonna do our thing over here. No, I'm being obviously oversimplistic in the way of business is structured. But there's an opportunity to say designers ultimately we spend a lot of time saying, well, how do we get closer to our customers and our end user? That helps us then guide and choose problems. Lots of things shift in organizations when you focus on that piece, and human-centered design sort of ultimately does that. And there's lots of things that go into building design. Like there's like this tree example. UX stands up, all this knowledge below it, and it can make out visual design or interaction design, products, services, websites, applications, all the sorts of stuff that we can sort of make tangible. But design thinking is the air; it keeps the tree alive. You don't know how it sort of functions. Design thinking is the sort of outcome or the sort of fuel of making that work and be engageable. And there's lots of roles. We didn't really go over any of your individual roles, but many of you work in. David and I, you're the only one who told me your work, so that's.
Yeah, I do reporting.
Reporting.
Yeah.
In the data realm. Right? So it's like lots of data, designers gather information, we have to use data generally to sort of build and work on our systems. Sometimes we can make on the input of the data, right? Like how are we getting it, how do we make decisions from that data, et cetera, et cetera. Now the role of these things is sort of engageable across an organization, but as we sort of see lots of different roles, as more and more people attach into a process, we then know how to share what we're working on and why, how that is impacting another process or whatever that is. And there's lots of this that actually has implications of, well, we need to get the data analysts on our team to show us whether we're actually accurate with our feedback loop or whatever that is. Or maybe we have gaps in our understanding which require part of company A or part of team Y, and then that sort of diverse, sort of interconnected weave that every organization is. Design thinking helps sort of make those connections. Oh, cool, you're gonna sit in a workshop, we're all gonna do problems. Or we're gonna make sure that this problem makes sense for your data team or whatever that is. Does that make sense? Now, the roles generally change at lots of places, but the opportunity is ultimately that if design thinking sort of underpins and connects all their roles together, then you have less about what your role is and you have more about, well, let's just make stuff together and let's all align it as we go. Now, software development roles, which is where my expertise sort of comes involved a little bit more, since I build stuff with computers mostly. There's a lot of opportunity to say, well, how can we spend time at human focus, the research, the human side? How do we know how to behave, why they're not choosing building this? Like, there's a big question. Like, well, why not? Well, there's maybe lots of reasons, but there could also just be like, oh, well, it's a utility. People just sort of set it and forget it. And then we have to sort of do these other things. We have to reinsert ourselves in the process, or it happens too late in point A or point B. Again, I don't know any of the outcomes of what result in that, but the result of I can't sort of apply a different change to the back end of the system, or the front end of the thing is designed, if I don't understand the picture. Design thinking helps us understand the picture, and ultimately that is quite useful for our practice. I like to sort of go back to the sort of beginning. I sort of say Plato was the first user experience designer because he had quotes like this. How many people do our world bigger? as people who make stuff, design thinking helps us in the process of making things. We want to understand the needs. We don't understand the needs, we're just sort of grabbing at straws or hoping something will work. It's not really as effective as it can be. We can focus on one, defining the problems effectively, and then also really grabbing at the need of how that applies, that can then sort of help us create and solve problems. Does that make sense? With that, we're gonna take a quick break. It's 2 o'clock. Anybody need a quick break? Yes, I know I've been just sort of yammering at you and sitting here using your brains, writing down. So take a quick break for 10 minutes, and then we'll get right back into it. You can take photos. Share your stuff. I'll come around and take photos at one. I'm just looking there to figure it out.
I guess you have a snack bar.
High prices or low prices?
No prices.
Low price.
So that's an hour.
Yeah. Good thing. I'm assuming I might be able to acquire. And first get paid, I'm gonna say this make a little hard, most people. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Levels by through and you know what I'm going to say. You know what? Change those. Yeah. You're on that big tree and I think that is true. It's a lot more than look at that.
Yes.
You can hardly see. What? Seems pretty good. Yeah. Yeah. And we had another thing, sometimes there's so much that will be here at some time, even though it's it's off to one side, but still, it feels like.
Here, definitely want a connection.
That's my making.
Okay, yeah.
Customer success.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a new-
Let's see, I just sit here, there.
It was boring. You were-
He's the one sitting next to her.
Yeah, I know Brian.
Oh.
I just didn't know where he went.
I'm here. In excess, I say they are. It's not.
Except for this.
I teach at those.
Excuse me.
Well.
I think that's graphic something.
Yeah, it could be film and design.
Yeah. Usually number of spots.
Yeah.
Absolutely. At some level, we're all teaching, right? That's actually in charge. So when.
Here, I can pause the recording for a second. Good.
What?
Yes.
I know. It's like you have that. Actually, so. I'm supposed to be able to say, I guess. I know, should step that. I want to have. Yeah.
I hope so.
But it's not actually.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of this.
Another group.
Well, it's hard now. And I put some time. The data is already there.
That's the.
I said. I told you, I don't think you were working on this. I was working on it.
Yeah.
I know, I've used 40 hours. I just got a lot of time side. Yeah, when I go to it, and so I would try to have them doctor. I can do a third.
Let's just do one tape. It's fine. Teams of 5. Not listen to that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what he's figuring.
It's a little easier.
Yeah. I think you're now, but I haven't seen much.
Only during.
All right, let's get started. Let me get somebody stretching. These are long. I understand. This is a little bit of work, right? But and we'll, yeah, stand up and stretch needed. But we'll get into the next piece of this. So now that we have a starting place, right? Problem maybe that we're thinking about, focus on it. We're gonna focus on some of that problem. That may give us some brain space to sort of consider this. And this is where the next piece of design thinking becomes quite relevant. Is that like, yes, you have a problem, but now we need to talk about empathy. Who is this for? Right? How do we sort of consider or think about this opportunity and the challenge at which aligns to the people that we should be thinking about or engaging in? Now, empathy is the sort of core of this, and it starts with, can be sort of larger in a research phase, but also just starts with this relationship. Now, let's just have a quick discussion. What is empathy? Oh. It's kind of like sympathy. It's kind of
Something that you feel that feels like what you've experienced.
it's feeling the feeling you've experienced.
To understand someone's feelings.
The ability to feel someone else's feelings.
Understand.
Understand. Okay. A good word there. Right. Where do we experience empathy? Everywhere?
Relationships.
Relationships. This city really tries your empathy. Yeah, this city particular. I live in Los Angeles. I drive around. No? No. Easy to ignore. How do you know you have empathy?
How do you what?
How do you know you have empathy?
Connect with someone a little better?
Okay,
You can understand what someone feels.
you can understand what someone feels.
I thought empathy is you've had that experience, and sympathy is you feel for someone else, but you haven't had it. No.
What?
I think you got that heart on you, something like Care Bear.
Yeah. Now, empathy is empathy learned?
It could be.
Yeah. Not everyone's empathetic. It's not innate. Okay. If you have no empathy, what does that make you? Yeah. I mean, a lot of people would call us psychopath and asshole. Yes. Yeah. Azure, sociopath. Now, the role of empathy is important. Let's go this way. Now, empathy, all design at some level starts with empathy. It's a relationship output. Empathy as a larger goal. And let's skip that slide. So it talks about empathy. Oh, it's right here. Empathy is the concept in which you as an individual can place and understand the relationships of the scenarios and feelings of the experiences that others have as a way to align both common goals. You as society or as people is like, I know what's happening, or I know what that feels like, or I can experience that, or I can understand why that would be frustrating, or why that would be helpful, or why that would be joyous. And the role of this is sort of important, is that design and human beings are really complex. All of us are very different. But we all then share a similar face. We all share potentially understanding similar things. We literally all see color differently. And the things that are here is stuff that we're in control of, like your boundaries, your goals that you set, how you speak to yourself, what's in your control, how you handle challenges, what you give your energy to, whether you are extrovert or introvert. There's like all this way in which you sort of talk about how we as individuals engage in the world, but then also how we understand that that is resonating or meaningful to anyone else that we're considering thinking about. Now, because humans are complex, we want to try and be accurate. And the role of empathy is that it's uniquely human. Humans have empathy. We know it because we live among other mammals and humans. Some would say, oh, my dog is empathetic, but not really. And they do care. You don't want to sort of blanketly like create this weird hierarchy, but we're humans. We create hierarchies. That's what we do. But ultimately, when you design people, whether it's products, websites, or services, that ultimately your people are not abstract users. We call them users because that's an easy way and it's less words to write, and it's not Joanne in Michigan. But there's an opportunity for us to sort of think about who our real people are and make intentional decisions about what we think is authentic to that end user. And we can't design for everyone. So we have to sort of say, well, how do we consider human beings and narrow it down and focus on a small set of few that we can either go understand more deeply or be more accurate about for the purposes of aligning to our problem, solving what we need to solve, and ultimately communicating to everyone else about why it was effective in that scenario for that person or whatever that is. Is that clear? Now, empathy is really hard. It's practicable. And ultimately, some of the things we're going to be doing today is about improving your practice in engaging in articulating empathy, but also in increasing it. But really, like, who are your users? They're probably a broad set of people. Right? Some of you may sort of be able to say, oh, yeah, design technology sort of helps us get closer to them, but there's millions of people potentially who use a particular product or service. They are part of a utility. They all have similar needs or outputs, but we sort of have to align that to say, well, who are we really designing for? And why is it useful to think about them? What are we trying to solve by sort of engaging in that? And there's a sort of opportunity here for sort of aligning teams, engaging in the outputs, and sort of thinking about people in a more difficult or nuanced way, right? Many of us can sort of say like, oh yeah, I sort of know my neighbor. I sort of know those people who live down the street. But you don't actually know what's going on in their day every day. You're not sitting on their shoulder like a bird. And we can't do that as designers either. It's actually impractical, right? So we have to sort of build in abilities to sort of extend our empathy, but ultimately say we can gather enough to feel confident that we're knowledgeable enough, and that may remain true if you interchange, right? Say, oh, I know enough about 20-year-olds to sort of make an estimated guess, right? Enough about the elderly, about what they're dealing with, and what that is. And we supplanted a user to sort of help us talk about that person in a more meaningful way, or that group of people in a more meaningful way. Now, what this sort of translates to is that empathy is in design, it's balance. The role at which we're trying to sort of say is how much empathy do we need? And if you have your subject on one end and you have a designer your object on the other that doesn't have any overlap, really hard to say, I know that this is solving the problem for the user, because you're sort of shoehorning in solutions that you don't actually know are related to the needs of the end user. But what you don't want is transference. And transference is where you say, like, well, I use this, and I, as a designer, feel this way, so therefore I am right. Because and ultimately, the hardest part about doing design is having some level of subjectivity to your output, but being comfortable enough to saying it has pushed me. Like, I am not a 12-year-old girl. Can everyone agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Somebody would be like, yeah, you sure look like one. You got the frame of one. But some people got that. But I would also know that I can, with research and with understanding, address that audience through means that are practicable by me as a designer. I can go talk to them. I can go understand what their needs are. I can go talk to their parents. I should work with really younger ages. It becomes really complicated because you can just go to like the playground and be like, hey, like that doesn't work, right? Now the role of this is that you are ultimately not the designer or the user. And so applying that to your subject and object is about applying this idea. I can learn enough about my subject and my object to design and use practices of empathy and designing and articulating who my end users are to be confident that what I'm considering or thinking about is relevant to my problem space, is useful for me solving the problem, and is telepathable to the person I solved it to. I recognize that you had this problem, or you told me you had this problem, but you really didn't have that problem. There's a lot of this in your research. What is the problem? You ask your user, and they tell you, and you're like, that's not, you don't really know. Like they can't, the user ultimately can't articulate problems that they have because it's behavioral, or it's you need to experience it or whatever, right? And the opportunity there is that we as designers can then overlap enough with who our users are to sort of be effective in designing and also design that. And I'm gonna repeat this again, it's really important. Each of you is not the user. You are not designing anything for yourself. It's important to say, I know enough, but it's not for me. And knowing that it's not for you helps you say, well, what information do I need to help me consider what that person needs? Other languages, who needs accessibility needs, or et cetera, right? There's lots of nuance in this space, and we can work at these places to do that, and it requires practice. The practice ultimately is quite fun because we then get to sort of invent. And lots of times we'll do short times, like in this workshop, we're just going to be leaning on stuff that we sort of know, and we'll articulate that in a meaningful way, and then it can be extendable. But your persona or who you think your users are is not static. It's not I made all the decisions about who my end users are, and they stay the same forever. It's like, no, it actually is. It's more dynamic and has more opportunities to shift, and that becomes an opportunity to go back to the well. And this is where design thinking generally is this feedback loop. We think this was who we were solving it for, but they shifted or they changed. Let's go revalidate that these things are true. Let's understand if this is sort of meaningful, and that results in ways in which to articulate it. Now, most of us can spend some time sort of thinking about a general user in meaningful ways because we are people. We can sort of say, oh yeah, they have general needs or outputs. But where personas and user personas generally can be quite helpful is to extend that or push it to the edges and use more frameworks for considering higher level needs or more nuanced set of outputs. Part of that is this framework called the ICF. So we'll go over this in a second. Has everybody heard of the ICF framework? Okay, well, you'll learn about it today. The ICF framework sort of comes from the WHO, which is the World Health Organization. It's mostly a framework used for doctors and thinking about accessibility and disability, but there's opportunity which to infuse that thinking into who our end users are, and it's sort of an opportunity to say, like, what is the context, what are the scenarios, what are some of the things that we can assume or safely make assumptions about, which is where personas or what we'll be doing are important in the first place, right? It's an empathy opportunity for exposing where we actually know and what we don't know. Most of the times it actually shows more what we don't know, which is actually the fun part. Oh, I think that they have the problem. And you're like, well, do they? Like, do you know that this is actually true? And you're like, oh, well, only research or going back to the well. Most of these are an initial opportunity for considering who your end users are. I'm curious, has anyone ever designed or built a proto persona before? Or a user persona? Oh, one? Okay, great. If you haven't done it before, we'll practice it today, but there's an opportunity. So the ICF framework is this premise that essentially is a helpful tool for building empathy and is organized around this idea of classifying health and disability as a core component of how you actually go about the behaviors and activities in your world and day. And it can be useful for articulating an end user or a person in a more sort of clarifiable way, or to say, what does that have impact to? Does that make sense? So some of these are just, it feels like a simple framework, but as you start getting into it, you're like, oh, wait, that person does have heart disease, and therefore they can't walk up 25 steps, or whatever that is, right? So it's now, the way this sort of works is that the health condition or disorder is sort of at the top as a way to sort of frame things that align to their body function. So I was using heart disease as a sample. So they have heart arrhythmia, and their body function is their heart doesn't beat in the same way that the rest of our hearts do, and they have a pacemaker, right? That might be the sort of output, which limits their activities for high impact exercise or whatever that is. And then might also restrict participation for water skiing or another, what, other activities. Maybe a marathon, et cetera, et cetera. But then that has environmental factors. I think I used the water skiing example because my uncle had a pacemaker and it failed in the water. It was terrible. But we like learned, we're like, wait, we don't know what's happening to you. And it was like, oh, something failed and then like actually got wet. It's terrible. It was all terrible. He actually won. He won a big thing he won some money from the players. Because they told him he could do that, and then he like went and did it in the bubble side. Either way, my point there is that in considering this larger or broader relationship, it actually sort of impacts the things that modify behavior. And the behavioral aspect of what we're articulating is what we want to know about our end users. Right? Factors that go into not signing up for or whatever that is, right? Like there's overlap that sort of aligns to the task to which we're trying to do at hand. And it's not just general. We want our end user to align to the things that we're trying to solve, right? And this is where we can sort of articulate that. Does this make sense? Okay, I'm gonna go over, just gonna walk through a premise of this, and then we'll all get an opportunity to practice it as a team. We're all gonna sort of get on a big sheet of paper to do that. But here's an example of like where you start is you humanize your user. I have some photos in here, but ultimately we're going to do a quick little drawing. This will need to be a piece of paper. But ultimately here's an accessibility picture for Dan Brown. He was overweight. And he has, you give them a name, no ranges, you give them a specific name and purpose. You can sometimes add an image. Again, we'll do, if we did this digitally, we could use some generative AI to engage in that. And then you add a health or accessibility condition. The next piece is that you then apply that health condition into body functions and structures. So his overweightness may cause cardiovascular disease or have challenges with his structures of movement and outputs. His activities might be things like riding Uber or bus services, and his participation is limited at getting to the gym, let's say. Okay. Now, the activities and the output, sometimes moving between them sort of helps align that. A lot of times you're trying to align to one activity or task, and a lot of these should be aligned, like this was done for a ride service problem space. Okay. So if your problem space is paperless billing or getting to a store or effectively communicating, whatever that is. Does that make sense? So you align that as it goes. And then the last piece of that is that it goes down into the your top factors that align to the things that go into environmental factors. So some of the things that may align to the rationale of being overweight is he has lack of healthy food options. And that is has impacts on being personal factors being. Does this make sense? Generally. Okay. Now the framework is sort of a way to sort of align some of the things that can have impacts to behavioral outputs, and then we can sort of articulate them into a larger sort of summary. We'll sort of talk about that as we go. But
it's like the proto persona that we're going to implement.
This is a framework to start thinking about what will then fold into a proto persona, which will do. That makes sense? Okay. So what I want everyone to do is get your big sheet of paper. You're going to work on this as a team, and we're going to build out the top steps of this framework. So I wanted you to draw on the piece of paper, and I wonder if I have this here. Okay. Get in your groups. Draw just a box. Make this shape. A box, 3 boxes across, and 2 boxes at the bottom. If we want to see your box, somebody use boxes and ask your private. It doesn't matter what. We want to see your box. Leave a space at the bottom in the bottom third for writing. You're already.
Are you ready?
All 4 levels. That's gonna be your end user.
Oh.
And your team and you know these figures. Table 1.
See, nice. Great, give her a little, give her a little pencil sketch, maybe a stick figure. Add a name. It doesn't need to be boxes, just think of it more as space. If you want to put it in a box. Just maybe not very big outside the box. Good. Oh, there you go. This is pretty clever. Very nice box.
Oh, I have a good idea.
You can use post-it notes, same difference.
What is it say?
Her name? You draw a little picture of who got the
Do you want us to actually add a name of a person?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Add a name, first and last name,
Name and then-
do a little drawing.
Because they're the dads, like, maybe they won't- they know it more. They think of it
It's like Johnson and Smith, they're like the most common names of all of them in the market. It says in the box. What's in the box? The next piece is add a condition.
This is how-
So it's condition. You have a problem. You have a problem of leadership. Not sure what happens if the condition typically has to do with health. Health or accessibility conditions. So let's do as well. Okay, now, yeah. Good. Yeah, I'll go back to the section so you get something. Yes.
Are we doing this for medical condition or our problem?
So the condition should be for the end user, which is associated with your public.
Well, we need to think of our end user.
So your end user is Rachel Grove, and she has a health condition
So she.
or an accessibility problem that may be relevant to, what's your guys' problem space again? Training and knowledge. Okay. She is neurodivergent.
Oh, she's great.
Yes. Yeah, maybe you're considering. Great. Quick little drawing of Betsy's mother. That's 92. So very good. Body functions that are challenged with Betsy are walking to the mailbox. There you go. That's participation. The body function or structure is what? Her. You have a few accessibility here.
Yeah,
Butterfly side structure.
Oh, you said.
Yeah, give me that. So it's limited to her is reading, reading bill, reading some test. So the activity is associated with the And then the participation, essentially, is going to walk the mailbox is the activity. No one. So now their bodily function is that they the bodily function is about perception. The brain. That's participation.
Maybe not as
Sure. Good. Good, you can do it. Yeah. Good, good, good. So yeah. So yeah. So the participation is using the gym is about trying to impact this. Yeah, but he has to use the Uber ride to get to the gym. The participation of getting to the gym is what's limited by his this is from a real good case study. Not two, but not a man that was large.
I was in New York.
Making it grow. I remember that. It's like really like yeah, it doesn't. It's like
He had his blind and a lot of the Ubers, the blind, social media and all kinds of drivers.
oh, my favorite is I've gotten a number of Ubers that where the driver is deaf. Uses I know yeah, they're like using you're talking to their phone and they just sort of have a sign that says like I'm hard of hearing. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And they like and they it has a sign like we know American Sign Language, like they can talk to you. It's like, hey, this one. And he's like, oh yeah, and then he like whatever, texts into his thing. I don't know, I think it's about some of it's about considering access, right? We consider maybe different things about when you can run it.
There's nothing to do with this. The problem was That's why, I'm trying to figure out how our relates to, I know we have to think, so if you would all.
So the activity may be associated with.
No, because we're saying that even though our phone is not getting drones and just in
Understanding the needs of the trainee through the lens of them being neurodivergent. Helpful.
But is it the,
He's legally fine about that.
it's not trainer to trainer, we're going down here, right?
Yes.
So our phone is right, sorry, what is trainer to trainer, it's our phone. Eyesight is being affected.
Yes.
So the knowledge. So we're gonna, someone's hard to learn and we don't have the knowledge to start.
Address that problem. I believe you're address the user that has this. These needs.
Needs to be
Explicit need to be included in our training.
So it's beyond this, not even, we don't even know our requirements. Right,
And then-
and, but now we have to cover all the different people that they have to train.
They're not. Okay, yeah, or there's that opportunity to say, well, what, there's transitive properties of this stuff, so if you consider the needs of attention, that then may have. The trainer needs to like, how do I address?
Yes.
I need to understand who my audience is, to train them effectively. If I get a bunch of neurodivergent, training out, no training to help them, I am willfully opposed to address it. But then that may have an exception. It doesn't take them to stand here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And you can also like, well, maybe if our problem space is more aligned to the trainer, make your answer to the trainer, maybe there's a different, accessibility behavior that trainer gets. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, yeah. But like.
Okay, so the point.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the bodily function is your site.
Hold on.
And activities that they can do is.
And Rachel is still, the training.
Right, so they can't fill out, they can't effectively fill out applications, yeah.
That's the idea.
Yes, and the participation in that is, you don't get the. They don't be better. They can't, they take over the form and that's why they are able to.
Alright, we're getting them. The brain is not working because of my health background.
Okay. Just making, hopefully this is making sense. Again, some of these are directly interrelated, right? Like the heart, they're old or deals with that. And then the last piece of this is the environmental and the personal factors. So environmental factors may be associated with. There's one right here about walking to their mailbox, the environmental factors that they are limited in their home, in their home space. And personal factors that they really get involved, learn this thing. Particularly get in job, again, that might be associated with like the free vision check. It doesn't require. But it's. Maybe they want it.
That would be. You don't have to have then you don't have to.
Well, but so the problem, I mean, again, like, change with disability.
That's like.
And not have the.
I'd say when noisy environment or large group for that. There's a lot of people.
What happens, we need to overcome, potentially the lack of access, education, empathy for older people who use this tools, or building that. Lack of family support. People can't travel with the service. So did you get my point? So it's better here. Yeah. Maybe don't get it at all. No internet at all.
Question.
Yes.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet. What is ICM schedule?
The international, for, conditions. I can, I'll Google this for you. ICF framework stands for the International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health Framework. So they combined all, it's just an international classification for functioning disability and health. They didn't put the D and the H in there. Again, I didn't invent this thing. Okay. Good. Okay.
Similar.
Everybody got their framework done?
Yes.
All right. Good. Okay, now we're gonna write a quick summary of our end user. You guys got close? I'll leave it for a second.
Just about. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm gonna zoom in on this over here so you can see it a little easier. But we're gonna write a Mad Lib. Sorry. Can you see this now? This is a little closer. Okay, this is the Mad Lib. User is the demographic characteristics. Just write it exactly. The best, you need another sheet of paper, fine.
So what is the activity? Why does?
Oh, no. This is your own, you're writing a summary of your end user. Yeah. So Rachel Grove is a neurodivergent. How old is Rachel?
What's the last one?
The last one was, yes, the personal language. So those are be like personal habits or things that sort of like. Yeah. She is yeah. Pulled into herself or is less engaged, doesn't reach out for help, but of course those are take care of the habits associated with. That makes sense?
It wasn't intensity quite, but,
Yeah.
for me.
Yes, this stuff takes a little bit of time, even like doctors and stuff are. Like, well, if you understand the habits, right, and those habits are associated with participation, facilitation. They are less likely to sign up for those facilitation efforts because, right?
Yeah.
So then you have to overcome the barrier of how to get people who are inclined to not go to those. That's it, because they know that they're not successful. It's important to do that's facility. Yeah. Okay, now, anyway, just write out a massive sentence. That's how materials we got. So in order finding it natural, it's bad. First time you write these, they sound a little garbled. It's not. It's like, I just mad with it. It's like, there's no words in there, it doesn't sound good. Good.
Here, I'm gonna go read you the one that I wrote for for John or for David. So here's an example of David. Daniel, that's what I meant. Daniel is an IT specialist from West Virginia. There's a demographic outputs, where they live, what they do, where are they, right? That's a little bit of an extension. But who struggles with being overweight. This causes him cardiovascular issues, for which he takes medication. It's an environmental factor. But he still indulges in unhealthy items from time to time, environmental factor. He would like to reduce his weight to improve his heart so that he can reduce his medication and be more productive. Daniel would like to be able to get around town through ride services like Uber, but doesn't always fit comfortably in smaller cars. There's the participation restriction, which makes it more difficult to him to access the gym, his participation, which would help him build better habits to reduce his weight. So there's that sort of like overarching story that's built from these outputs. I then put this into ChatGPT to have it summarize it for me, but you guys aren't going to do that. You're just going to use your own language. But the first one you build may feel a little garbled, but this is where write it out, read it as a sentence, and then repackage it to make the most sense as a summary. Is this clear? Okay. I'm going to go back here for you to write that out.
I like the.
I use this as an example. Uber was sued by a court system out of New York. It's very purpose. This is an overweight man with things left on the side of the road.
He's in New York.
Here, my sample is not relevant for Los Angeles, or relevant for this.
Yeah, I just don't.
So Betsy Miller, 92, living where? In Los Angeles, and the demographic.
That was a change.
Demographic age, location. Well, you can remember it. Right. Great. Yes, great. Okay. Yep. It causes difficulty in learning and joining busy environments. But there's. Yeah. Deals with it. It's good. Something feels more accurate. That's an assuming motivation, great, okay. Programs. It's always like, so now we're gonna do assessment.
Well, they have the technical policy. It's supposed to be 80. Most- However, there are some aspects of not, that is instituted training. Okay, so there is work in that, there are issues, we're not 100%.
And considering the legal response in accessibility. Mr. Box. Poster box. The coaster box. If you feel like that needs to go fine, read it over, and then we can go on. We'll do this in a second. We're gonna read these off together.
Okay, got it. An hour left.
She would like to.
Oh, let me go back to this, so you guys. I'm gonna give you 3 more minutes to write your sentence.
Get close. It's not about, it's college kids for practicing. These things can also be plugged into a being refined later. That's not. No, that sometimes the first time you write it is. You've used Mad Libs before, they're always clunky, right? They're clunky for a purpose, right? Yeah. But the role of, okay, I got close, and now I can refine it, that's the best option.
Looks like you do it.
Working on.
Not, yeah, and not getting access. Not feeling supported by an organization that sees her as a barrier. Well,
Okay, does everybody have a summary? We're feeling close. These get refined, so don't worry, like, again, we're gonna go a little clunky at first, but not kidding. Does anybody want to read their summary? Let's hear about Betsy. Here, can you stand up and show us Betsy? Oh, you're making it stand up. You, come on, here. Yeah, I'm gonna take a photo and you can stand up and we'll show everyone Betsy.
I have no idea. Betsy Midler is a 92-year-old retired teacher living alone in Los Angeles. Betsy deals with bad hips and poor eyesight. This limits her mobility and makes it hard to read small print. She would like to read and pay her LADWP bill more easily. Betsy is finding this difficult due to her lack of internet and having no one to help her with her technological challenges.
Good.
My team.
Pretty slow.
Pretty good for 92.
Pretty good for 92. It's LA, right? Yeah, you want me to read, we'll go back, we'll read this.
First, I gotta start with, look at these pictures.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's awesome.
She's wrong.
All right, Shirley Temple is a 29-year-old nurse from LA who struggles with asthma. This causes her breathing issues. for which she takes an inhaler but still enjoys a cigarette from time to time. She would like to improve her stamina to work longer hours, because our issue is the 90 working longer hours.
Oh.
Got it. Good. Yeah, emotionally good for the asthmatic. That makes sense.
Here's the whole thing.
Yeah.
You can take more days off.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Wow.
This is Coaster Box. Mr. Box is an adult male masseuse from Northbridge that is legally blind, which causes him vision issues. Mr. Box has no insurance or resources to help manage his blindness, but would like to be able to access materials in large print or braille so he can participate in the LADWP programs. But Mr. Box is finding it difficult to participate due to limited access to braille or large print materials, especially on our website, as some pages lack ADA compliance.
Probably a great suit, huh?
That blind masseuse thing. Blind masseuse. Alright, let's come over here. Those are margin. Exactly.
Here's ours. So Rachel Grove is a new hire CSR at LADWP and neurodivergent. That causes difficulty learning in large group environments, which is a requirement for the new hire CSRs. When in training, this condition causes her to shut down and become less engaged, which may impact her ability to become an effective CSR.
Okay, then let me ask you a question. Do any of your people exist? In real life, we know a boxer coaster box? No. Okay, or Betsy? Are they been playing?
Let's have that.
Yes.
Betsy on the phone, yeah.
I talked to Betsy last week. That's actually who I'm actually just relating this human being that I talked to that actually has these problems. Now, the reality of this is that we're making it up, but we're also leaning on some level of stereotype. We need to be mindful of these things at all times to some extent. And the role of this is like, well, how accurate is it? Does it feel authentic to an elderly woman in Los Angeles who has bad hips? Maybe. Or whatever it is. Now, the opportunity there is that this is a starting place, right? Aligning to a set of tasks, writing out a summary that does that. And what this helps us do is ultimately articulate more of a proto-persona. Have you ever built a proto-persona before? This is not a proto-persona.
Oh.
This is the ICF framework. All you made is a summary. All we did is one part. See what I did?
What's this supposed to eat for breakfast?
So what I want you to do is grab out another sheet of paper, and you're gonna build out your proto-persona using that summary. Does that make sense? So the way to do this is you're gonna create this could be split into 4 sections. I like to just do a left side that is your user and right side which is the aspects. But ultimately, you're gonna add your user's name and age and location. Rewrite your summary. If you need to refine it or change it, you can do that. You're up to reread this thing, make sure it makes sense. And then you're gonna add the accessibility conditions or behavioral demographics which are associated with your end user. Now, behavioral demographics are important because things like they're a new hire, they're a college grad, they live in they're married or not. Then the behavioral demographics are associated with what they do, which impacts your business. Is that clear?
No, sorry.
We'll just start with the name, age, and the recapturing the summary, and then we'll move on to the next piece. No one doesn't get too far ahead of you.
This is based on our ICF or just?
This is based on your ICF. We're just extending your ICF summary. We're just making a proto-persona on 4 beds. That make sense? Good. Really gentle.
Oh, never.
Okay, now in there, you're gonna rewrite your summary. You need to work on
I
it.
feel like rewriting the sound.
Yeah, that's right. This is a picture. That's great.
Not great, all
That's a
down.
great long time to picture.
Now we get.
So we can give it a move.
But
Sure.
it's, yeah, we don't, I, that was the latest.
Tear it up. Put it on there. Then you're gonna rewrite it. Some of this may need one rewrite there. Good find it.
I think we should add or go there.
We have it right here, we really need to rewrite it here.
No,
So this,
you,
yeah, okay.
unless you want to refine it.
No, oh, no, we're good.
So then you didn't include a picture.
Yeah.
Let's see, of Rachel, or her age. Yeah, it's in there.
Yes, 30, we have it.
Okay. So you're just recapturing some of the stuff, but it's in a little bit different format, so.
So more in the list.
More in a list.
Some numbers.
The important things that we'll get to is, okay, she was neurodivergent, has outputs, which also then has other factors that aren't just captured in their summaries, relevant for
The.
considering.
Accessibility, condition,
Yeah.
behavioral demographics.
So then her neurodivergence might be what? Introverted, she has social anxiety, she has hard time communicating, what people in her eyes and their eyes. There's lots of factors that go into neurodivergence as a umbrella and no expert. Yes, exactly. Where on the spectrum is she? We're all on the spectrum, just sort of that. No, we're all on it. Whether you live here or there. Yes, bingo. But that's where we get into articulating a little bit more specifically about what Rachel, not only just in her son, you articulate something,
Yes.
right? There are other aspects about her neurodivergency relevant for her behavior.
Okay.
No.
And that thing would be like, she joined the LADWP because they actually recruited her, and she felt she was full.
Or that there's the health insurance.
Bingo.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. I don't know that. There you go, my friend. That's making sense. Yeah, we just want to count more factors about. So-
So it wasn't like.
So her summary has a portion, right? Which is for age. So she has. Limited access to like women. Unless you want to rewrite that or point. That is a summary, great. Do some summary Right, this is now extended on for.
Like sometimes we slow down, we slow down.
Even mobility, we're excited to see it. Who are you? Okay. For licenses. No longer drive. Guys.
Maybe she gets filled with
Yeah, what was here? Easily overwhelmed. We're recapping that she's overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by what? Questions? Like group settings, by spaces that are too loud, social pressure.
We just say shit like, you know.
My large.
Widow, thanks for writing all that.
Oh, yeah. Widow.
Sounds like a job.
Yeah, this, at some level, a lot of this is character development. If you've done character development. It's ultimately a writing exercise.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, now you're Googling what.
I wouldn't, I.
That's fine. We're not all experts in stuff, we have to look it up. We don't have to, I would not even come close to claiming I know anything about neurodivergency. Not in the, you can pull stuff out, but yeah.
Oh, that makes you.
Yeah, you good?
Yeah.
It can be an information.
Yeah, or like,
What's his?
I had someone in my class when I.
Call back.
So the senior was going to that, wanted her to go back and want to really, let me. Like, I do. Yeah.
That's it.
I need to understand that.
I would say like.
And that's wrong word, right? The people I know that have it. Yeah.
I think this is good, but.
And some other behavioral demographics might be things like, is she in a relationship? Is she college educated? Does she have a car? Just other things that sort of associate with how they ultimately get around in the world and behave. The behavioral demographics are important for one, how they interact with us, like she is a good learner, she reads well, she can sort of, when she's given enough time, she can effectively just do the things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Participate
fully
in customer system.
In a relationship,
Got it.
It's always so literal. When I read that this is so like, that's not right.
Yeah, this is just fleshing out more about what Betty's life was like.
So for potential.
Yeah,
So it's fun, because it's not a real person, but there's this. We're just fleshing it out. Does that make sense? Considering more factors. And would be.
Because.
So.
Clear? And what you sort of align, again, you don't just align all of your accessibility or behavioral demographics.
Motivations.
Public transportation.
Colleges, yeah. What's the same?
Right. Right. Some of the pressures are driving. There's a lot. She's on 60. Yeah.
Social security, everything for their budget.
More and more, I feel like I've talked to Bessie.
Okay, once you have some accessibility and behavioral demographics fleshed out, just a little bit more about who you think your end user is. Jump down into the goals and need. What does
But now it's like.
Betsy need
She has work.
from your service to be supported?
What does she?
Can you repeat that one more time?
So now we're into the needs of your end user. So Rachel Grove may need some things to feel supported. What are those needs and goals? So her goal is to be successful at a job. Her goal is to fit in and find other people that understand, accept her. Her need might be to get promoted. Her own individual needs. Fleshing out the her, yes. Betsy might need.
Needs money.
Rachel might.
Good healthcare.
So it's
Okay,
not,
she needs good healthcare. Good.
so it's not like a persona that, these are different tracks. People like.
Well, we're trying to flesh out more about what Rachel needs.
Oh, to get to that.
high level.
And that might come back here, right? So in here, she's in this team at LADWP, she's neurodivergent. So what are some of the needs of neurodivergent? This might flush out like, they need to have a little more technical hair, they need to not say how far away. I don't know these things, but maybe aspect of it. They need a manager who understands and supports them in a meaningful way, accompanies them, who understands they need to step out. Scenarios. Well, this is aspect. Does that make sense?
There are some.
Yeah, pressure from the mind, custom. That's also good pressure, like, if you already think you put us, like, you're in trouble, you need to take a break.
Okay.
Breaks, you're gonna be in trouble.
Yeah.
So
So that was I haven't bought any, so she's. She should be 25.
Depends on the person if they take that as like a possible partner. I need that for them. I can't take on.
Oh, that wouldn't bother me. What would bother me? This is like not having to.
So anyways, all those things to me make it cheaper for them.
So if you find one on everything.
No,
Connected to enablers. Her environmental factors are getting worse and worse. She's never gonna break the cycle. Yeah. One behavioral demographic. Good, give her a phone. So. That, again, that's sort of clear. What are some goals of that? Once you stay connected. Great. She wants support. She needs to feel like she's not being left behind. She needs to like not have a color turn off. She needs to have a lifelong.
Decades ago.
It's not old, your lifeline.
Okay.
So they are have a lifeline break. Yeah. That's okay. Okay.
Goal for retirement.
Private college, I didn't have a home. You're in my mom and dad. And not the top, I always say there, but I would have it. I always said.
Reduce the financial cost of smoking.
No, it's all.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, the, good, alright, great. If you've got some good needs and goals, jump down into some of the pain points. What are the things that maybe they're really challenging for your end user when it comes to dealing with your problem space? So the hesitations or the pain points might be that Betsy doesn't need support in learning the technology. So her hesitation is doesn't have support in learning. She feels like she was successful in it in one way, why we should change that. She doesn't understand the value of change, so getting, for reducing the paper. Well, there's enough orders.
I'm
just being recently put back.
And then you have like.
Too harsh. Give a point.
I just think I'm trying to figure out what this last purpose that we're thinking of design or project now.
Think about that, you're the best person.
Great.
Work.
Make you sign off clarity.
Our ability. About someone else that.
Get a little. I was thinking we could use that on the district as our customer, but I don't know if we'd ever go. We would maybe task force. I'm not saying it's a problem. I know it's a good time. That makes sense.
Cost. Access, these are pretty common. Pain, access, knowledge, experience. Steps, process that you take. Good. Hesitations or pain points. Mute is a pain point. Which eats up brain space. We missed the the whole thing. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Then all others are like. Okay. So we're getting towards the end now. Again, your ICF framework as an opportunity to sort of flush out more for your end user is. Now, these things are imperfect at best, but they are starting place, right? Part of the thing that is an opportunity is to sort of look at, well, how are our needs
that we've identified through a high level summary of our end user. How are they extending our knowledge of this person, right? And I'll ask again, are these people real?
No, these are examples.
They are examples. We're making up, right? We're even Googling, like, what are the things that make up neurodivergent factors? We are not experts sometimes in smokers' behaviors or in what an elderly person is doing, but they're better than nothing, right? We're trying to sort of flush out some opportunities for what are the needs that are relevant in addressing why Betsy behaves the way she does and how we impact that. Or what is a way in which, considering the neurodivergent factors of a new hire, actually have implications to all of the people. Now, the role of proto-personas generally is that it gives us a starting place for focusing. It's not everyone in the world. We're talking about Rachel. She's 35 and she's a new hire. What are the things that she is dealing with? Well, she has a long commute and she doesn't feel well in group settings. And we're then forcing all of onboarding to be that funnel. It's the only way to feel good. Some of that's about strategy, some of that's the way organizations work, but you have to sit and say, well, is that the only way? The answer is no. But the role of design is to say, well, how do we then consider some things that are outside or pushed at the edges so that we can be, one, more knowledgeable, but also then be more effective for identifying if these are the needs that actually exist for Rachel, first of all, and if that's really the gap that exists, right? We may have seen it in our problem space, we may have recognized it in a summary or used it through the framework, but we then need to say, well, can we go validate this? Does Betsy exist when we actually go talk to other, octogenarians or older in our user base and see if the needs that we've identified here are scalable? Is it true that Betsy with the hip problem can use the internet? I don't know. Maybe. Sometimes it's like, actually, no, you're totally wrong. Old people use the internet all the time. They just don't want to use our website. Very different. Use Google every day, but she does not use our website. Maybe that's because the program or the thing we want to get her involved in is buried over here, and we want to show her that it's buried over there, or whatever it is. I have no way to know what those sort of challenges are. But the role of that is that at least it becomes a question. Hypothesis for what we actually know or don't know about our end users. And it's better than just taking a stab at all older people in the world. Saying, oh, well, at least we can talk about Betsy. Does that make sense? And it seems kind of hard, but ultimately we can get a team to sit around and say, well, here's all the needs that we have. And then we can sort of articulate that, right? I can visualize that person meaningfully. I could go find an actual customer who may represent Betty in our user base, or I could invent one using a generative AI tool, or I could sort of align to be about authenticity. Now, user personas and Twitter personas as a whole are a starting place. They are not an end-all be-all of who Rachel is. They are an opportunity to say, we've given ourselves an opportunity to articulate some of the things we know about our end user. And they can be done pretty fast, right? 45 minutes, we get a team together, say, hey, is this who our end user is? Let's actually go research with people, bring the knowledge that we have about who this is, and fold them into a more specific documentation, put them into places that can be scalable or shared, and then they can be moved around your teams, and then nobody's talking about end users anymore. We're talking about Rachel, about Betsy, and they're talking about, can't see what Betsy. Early. But you get people. Now the opportunity, obviously, in this is that the role of your proto-persona is that it's not just, you can do these sort of more service level where you just do this proto-persona aspect, but actually folding in the ICF framework allows us to give a broader picture of their needs and behaviors, right? What is it? Is there a behavioral factor that we consider in their outputs? Talking about a neurodivergent user versus somebody who's able-minded and able-bodied is very different, right? The needs that you push at the edges when you start considering accessibility and behavioral issues actually makes it more relevant for saying, is that something that could be relevant for all the people coming into the workplace and all the people that are sort of trying to sign up for a program or an aspect. And hopefully that makes sense. Is this clear? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, these things that you've designed, all on paper, can also be digitized, right? You can fold them into a framework. I'll send this out. I'll your guys' emails. And the stack and the sort of, I have a Big Jam, sort of access point we can sort of dump this stuff into, and we'll be using that next week as well. But the opportunity is that it doesn't just live as paper and sort of quick sketches, but it rapidly evolves itself to be more authentic, more human-centered, and takes on design in its general forms, and that's just an opportunity. And I can sort of show you some of these that look a little bigger. Here's that framework. Here was one of using ChatGPT to sort of get a nerd that's a little bigger. And the role of this stuff is that as you make it digital, as it becomes scalable, it can get attached to teams and outputs. And these proto personas aren't just useful in a workshop, but they actually become outputs of like, well, what decisions were made? Oh, well, we defined a few users. Here they are. Our team is going to focus on these 3 people or these outputs. And it's not just about one. Most of the times we have to sort of design and use our personas as a scalable set of interchangeable ideas or interchangeable outputs for considering different problems or different aspects, and they can be quite useful. I don't know. Do you guys use personas generally at here for stuff like this? Some groups do. Okay. And one of the challenges with these is that some groups are using this idea, some are not, but it's not scalable. So then everyone sort of has a different sort of framework or idea of what it means to sort of talk about customers. Obviously, if you can unify that stuff through more design thinking generally, this gets everyone on the same page, helps people sort of focus, and ultimately helps you tell better stories about how you ultimately helped that customer or that output. Does that make sense? So let's go here. Okay, so in looking at your proto persona, sometimes it takes some just going back over it, and there's somebody who's like folding some stuff in. What I want all you to do is just document it right now. Every photos of it, you capture it. But all of you individually work on it. You build these things. Photo, grab some images. I've done it as well. You should grab your own photos and that stuff. Make sure you're documenting. I will share out some documentation as well. But yeah, get hanging on the wall. Yeah, that's the fun part about physical objects. There's Betsy Midler. One thing to be mindful about generally when you're coming up with proto personas, try not to use no name. Really template. It's a person that's right. Betsy Midler is well, you just want to, you don't want to use celebrities, you don't want to use John Doe's output name. They can sort of feel ultimately you might hold it. I don't know. But you get my point. They made like Rachel Grove, that's generic enough to know that it's a woman. Maybe in her 30s. I mean, like, oh, it's Brad Pitt. No, we all know who Brad Pitt is. If you're wrong, you're nowhere close to Brad Pitt. You're nowhere accurate with an idea. That makes sense. Totally. You got it. Okay. So as we're getting towards the end, one of the things that's quite relevant about motor personas generally, like they start kind of sketchable, low fidelity outputs that looks like a team can put together pretty quickly. They like that there's little drawings, you can plug glasses and output. They don't feel that real, but they, as you refine them, they start to get more and more effective and accurate. To make your proto personas even more accurate, it requires doing more work. It requires doing observations, seeing if you know real Rachels that work in your organization and are neurodivergent that you could study or you could ask questions of. You can actually validate that the things that you're thinking about them or the needs that they have or don't are actually real. Sometimes this requires user research. And you go talk to a bunch of Betsy We need to actually understand if these are the needs that are real or aren't real. We can fold some of those needs together into a more accurate persona. And that then may help identify if our problem space or the idea that you're sort of focusing on is actually a real problem. And that might help us then articulate a more specific set of insights and questions that we need to pursue. Some of them might be, is it overwhelming? We assume it's overwhelming, but we don't know. Is it overwhelming? Yeah, dude, I had no way to enter into that feeling confident in any meaningful way because I didn't even know it was going to be a group project. I didn't know I was going to have to sit at a table and read aloud, but I was very uncomfortable. And if that was, but I'm running the shop, so that's the little. Now, the role of this generally is that we start with a big guess, and through work and process, putting things down on paper, we start to identify some clarity. That feels accurate. That feels real. I'm more understanding of the system. I communicate that to someone else, and they agree that those are the things that Betsy is going through. Yeah, I talked to Betsy yesterday, and my grandma's just like that, or whatever, right? We all sort of lean on these experiences generally in our life, but the role of that is that it leads out to opportunities the businesses are considering, statements of a problem that are more accurate, and we can then pull in that narrative or storytelling from our end user for communicating what is the recommendations or what are the options. And we'll do that a little bit more next week. Now, generally, this early stage of practicing empathy it's fledgling. You got to do it a lot. I like doing proto personas. Favorite choice. People are there, you're waiting, you can make a little cross in your notebook and be like, who is that person over there? What are they doing here? And why are they so frustrated? And mean, looking mean, and all like, look at their backpack, it's so weird, it's like, shit, I have no idea what's happening. But the role of sort of generally understanding the scenarios, the opportunities, where people gather, what they are, we're all very different. But the more we can sort of lean on these tools, start pulling them out, and then when you're forced to say, hey, well, why is Betsy Grove actually neurodivergent and what are their needs? It's like, well, I know they're their needs because I observed them. I have some research in this outputs. I can connect the dots in a more meaningful way, and that then results in outcomes. Now, framing the challenge meaningfully, getting your team all to focus on that, then to say, how is this problem relatable or associated under a specific end user? What are some factors that end user can sort of be considered and are meaningful to consider? Some things are not meaningful to consider in their outputs. They may be a factor that they do, but it doesn't really. Smoking may be useful, maybe not a factor that actually impacts how they make decisions about where engaging with their workplace or whatever it is. Maybe it does, who knows, right? But we sort of need to sort of tune or find a way to say, I am choosing things that are relevant because I have identified them as being unique, and then I can fold them into the stuff that is communicatable out for why that problem is useful. Does that make sense? Okay, go. Next week, I have a bunch of links in here for stuff that you could pay attention to. There's lots written on this in the space of design thinking and where the stuff is useful, but we'll go there. If you have questions, you can reach out to me individually, and I will share out the set you guys for next week. And next week, I'm just going to go back to show you what's here. Let me just do it here. Next week, we will be exploring the second diamond in this output, which is some ideation, a little bit of prototyping, and some testing. Sort of build up some stuff. We may not get to a full set of tests, but we just similar to this, we're going to be sort of aligning. But what I want to do is I want these proto-personas to come back to us next week. If you want to digitize these, I have some resources that I will share in email that you seem to sort of take this and sort of digitize them, sort of make outputs, and we will be using some more digital tools next week. As we're going to talk about. Is that clear? Yes. Any questions? Bring computers next week. Bring computers next week. Yes.
If you guys want, we can keep your paperwork here. We'll just bring it back. So okay. On your table.
Great. And if you have questions, reach out. Really, whatever. I ended a little 10 minutes a little early, but I think we all
worked hard. You all have a busy day.
Next week.
We'll be in the same teams next week too. So sit in the same tables. You have a genius idea. Add it in there. Just like, oh, and I sat and left the workshop and I was like, this should be added.
Ready to send the deck up, I'll send it to me and then I'll.
Yes.
You need to,
We do that right now.
Yeah.